Welcome to Gregorian Hello.
Welcome to Gregorian Chat.
With your hosts,
Dom.
and Dom.
Welcome.
This week, why are you putting your lightsaber down, man?
Okay.
This week is, as you might have guessed, a kind of Star Wars-esque
Yes.
episode, themed a little bit around Star Wars. We're going to be talking...
We're going to be talking about why can't Jedis get married?
Also, what's the deal with priests?
Yeah. So we thought we'd delve into that
Yes.
subject. It's quite topical.
It's good, yeah. What are we drinking today, Dom?
Well, we are drinking tea. We're drinking Toasty Warm.
Yes, we are. This tea is called Toasty Warm, and it's coming to you from T2, the amazing tea connoisseurs. It is one that we've tasted before.
That's true.
In fact, we've recorded this podcast before. This is the second time round.
This is not the second time we've had to do a second recording.
That's right.
And so we are maybe not necessarily actually having Toasty Warm. But you don't know that. And Toasty Warm is delicious and you try it out, especially with this bad weather coming up.
Toasty Warm is really the kind of tea that you'd want to be having on a day like today, which is just kind of miserable, gloomy kind of day.
Yeah.
But yeah, what have you been up to, Dom?
What have I been up to? Well, it was my friend's baby's baptism on the weekend. And so that baby got baptised. Little 80. Oh, thank you.
The baby was 80.
Yes! 80
out.
months old.
Senior citizen at baptism. How about that?
How much is it?
Actually, Father Chris had to baptise a senior citizen the other day when they died.
That's true. That's true.
Just before they died.
You pass me that.
It's never too late for salvation.
Never too late to say.
Is it too late now for salvation?
That's the one. Because
this is at least the second time that their song has surfaced in our podcast, which is kind of scary.
True.
Although, to be honest, little confession is that Justin Bieber's latest music, I actually find it palatable. Like I can stand it.
He's come a long way from baby ooh.
That's true. Yep.
But yes, what have you been up to this weekend?
What have I been up to this week? I've just been doing a bit of recording for some friends. Yeah, a bit of recording at the old home studio in the spare room. But yeah, really looking forward to Star Wars at the end of the year.
Ooh, yes.
And I do still have to watch Guardians of the Galaxy 2, considering that
You do?
last week we kind of railed Brendan for giving it a bad review, when in fact I hadn't seen it. And now he's like done a response video
to his own video,
which I need to watch, but I need to watch the movie first to not ruin the spoilers. But I see that Jeff Goldblum is in it, or is that not a thing?
Jeff Goldblum. Oh yeah, I've forgotten it. No,
guy from Jurassic Park.
I think he
Don't
is.
tell me anything about him, but anyway.
Well, then no, he's not in it.
All right then.
I don't know.
But speaking of sci-fi, onto Star Wars now. This whole thing about Jedi not being able to marry.
Yes.
Is
Intriguing.
Granted, it's intriguing, but granted, it's one of the things that a lot of uber fans of Star Wars often say they might critique George Lucas for, because he wants to give the Jedi this mysterious kind of important backstory, but doesn't quite flesh it out enough. So the situation is that you hear, especially in episode 1, 2, and 3, from Anakin,
yes,
saying, "Well, we're not allowed to get married," and he has
can't do it. Sorry,
this
Padme.
big problem because he wants to marry Padme. I mean, which, come on, like
Natalie Portman, right? Am I right? Natalie Portman, if you're watching this, hey,
that's right.
we're both married. Leave us alone.
But anyway, so he has big issues with not being able to marry Padme, and it's he talks about it for the whole Jedi Order is not being able to marry.
It's kind of a real key theme to like the first 3 episodes, isn't it? Like,
kind of is.
if nothing else happens, that's what happens.
Yeah. True.
And also like galactic trade senates and stuff like that.
Yeah. We would never do anything to affect the plans of the Senate. But there is actually one Jedi who was allowed, the council allowed him to get married. I think he's on the council. His name is Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Mundi, not
He was
Tuesday.
a Syrian.
From Syria.
I don't know how to pronounce that, but he was Syrian. Kyrian. But the ratio of females to males on his planet was 10-1, and they needed to repopulate. So I mean, who's not going to
do what you got to do, you know?
Exactly. And you got to savor those opportunities.
Yes, actually, that's a good idea for a podcast.
Unless you're forced to.
Yeah. Dark side. Anyway.
So yeah, he was the only Jedi who was actually allowed to marry.
But apparently, even then, he still kept a distant relationship from his children.
That's right.
Which is terrible. Those children grow up with daddy issues.
But the idea with the Jedi, right, is that they say, well, we've got to distance ourselves from these really deep and meaningful relationships, because if they break, or when they put pressure on our lives, they may cause us to turn to the dark side because of hate or anger. They might just go fear. Emo. They might just go emo. So
essentially, that's what a dark side is. But that's all fine and well, Dominic. I can see the point you're making. However, we already have these relationships with significant people in our lives.
It's true.
Called our parents and our brothers and sisters. And if they got killed or murdered, maybe we get to a bit of a dark side too, having the same sort of feelings. What do you say to that, George Lucas?
George Lucas would say to that, well, that's exactly what we see with that's exactly what we see with Anakin when his family... Oh, he sounds Canadian. When Shmi, his mum, which I always thought was the funniest name ever, sounds like Captain Hook's right-hand man, is murdered, by the Sand People.
I know, but that wouldn't stop him from getting married. He still went AWOL.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is his answer would be, wouldn't really help him out. Weak sauce. And then he would look as dumb as he is Lucas dumb.
Well, he's just taking a jab at it.
Yeah, Boba Fett. So, thinking about this with priesthood, okay? Priests in the Catholic Church do not marry.
Yes, and also they do dress a bit like Jedis.
So true. So I was thinking about this though. I was like, are priests? Is it the same deal as Jedi? Is it the reason they can't marry? Is it because of this close attachment? I said, surely not.
No.
Surely not. And this is where I like to say this is not an analogy for priesthood, but it does make you start to think about why priests in the Catholic Church don't get married.
That's true.
So we did a bit of thinking. We did a bit of talking to Father Christian.
Being a priest.
And
he made some very good points. One thing he did point out is, as a priest, we see a similar situation within a secular job known as doctors. You may have heard of them.
Indeed.
And they can't, if they date their patients, if they marry their patients, it is, they're in a lot of trouble. You're not allowed to, as a doctor, you're not allowed to start a relationship with one of your patients. It's not right because it starts a very unhealthy relationship. Now, the difference between a doctor and a priest, as well as all the medical training, is a doctor, when he goes home, no patience. He's in his home life, maybe with his family, maybe lives on his own, whatever.
He's got no patience for anything.
He's
like, where's my toast?
Yes, and because he's on his own, no toast coming. So look out for your doctors. Make them toast every now and then. But also, with priests, their patients are 24/7. When do you stop becoming a priest? You don't. Even people that have been laicized technically still have the faculties of priest. So, it's the same situation on a practical level as kind of like a doctor or anybody in the medical profession. You can't have that. You can't have that relationship with somebody you're ministering to, someone you're healing, someone that's under your care.
Right. And as you would imagine, I'm sure, if a priest were to take a wife, you would hope she would be a Catholic and therefore would be basically one of the parishioners. So, that's like a small point, but we were talking about it. There are practical reasons and then there are theological reasons. So maybe just a few more of the other practical reasons first. So imagine you're a priest.
Okay, 1 second. Got it.
Okay. You get right into character. Yeah, I'm talking. So you imagine you're a priest. You've just been assigned to the parish of Karikari, if there is one. And
yes, my child.
I completely lost my train of thought now. And you're living in Karikari. It's not a very flash place. They don't have a huge budget. You need to have a family. This is too hypothetically there are married priests, and your family come to live at the presbytery in Karikari. Now the church now has to fork out not just like double the budget. You've got kids as well.
Yes.
So there's at least
Yeah, because priests get a stipend, and it's like. Yeah. Is it based on the minimum wage?
Pretty well. I don't know if it's based on minimum wage, but it's essentially almost the equivalent of a minimum wage. So it's not a lot. In short, it's not a lot. It's not really a living wage because they actually get accommodation and things provided, so they don't need a living wage. If they were to have families, they would need to be provided with a living wage. Now that's just a small. You might say that it's a small concern really for the ultimate goal of bringing people to the kingdom of God.
True.
But there are other things, other just more practical concerns. And that is, like you were saying before, a priest who is married to the church but also married to his wife has an obligation to, in reality, when you're married to somebody, they should come first.
True. True.
They should be your first call. You might have a dying parishioner or something that you need to go and visit, but your wife is in labour. I mean, what do? You could have a little baby and bring the baby to see this dying parishioner, and it'd be like a life and death situation. But you could also just not get married.
Yes, because I remember one of the things that I was told, one of the things that made me consider the priesthood a bit, because I thought it was pretty cool, is as a priest, you could get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning to go and be with somebody in hospital, in prison, wherever they're needed. They need your priestly faculties, and you just have to get up and go. And I was like, that's so cool. But then imagine yourself, you're in that situation, it's 2 a.m, you get a phone call. First off, that wakes up the people in your house with you, your wife and your children, and you have to go. You don't know how long you're going to be. Your wife then has to, get the kids up, get ready for school and all those things, go to work on her own.
Endless problems. Another huge one Father Chris was saying, imagine that you're giving a confession and a young woman walks in, you're a priest who's looking for a wife. A young woman walks in and gives a confession, but the whole time, there's that reality, the possibility that she could be a romantic interest for you.
Yeah.
So there's a weird dynamic going on there.
Yeah, it's kind of like.
And some people might say, well, that just means that priests need to get married before they become a priest. But there are a whole bunch of logistical problems. Something that was even bigger, going on to some of the more theological reasons why not. I remember you were mentioning and talking about the Eastern Rite and the Western Rites.
Yes. So there are 22 different Catholic rites. And one of the things we're often told is so there's only two rites that have a celibate priesthood, and there is a truth in that this isn't a dogma or a doctrine. This is something that it could change. Tomorrow, the Pope could say, actually, married men can become priests.
That's right.
But what would change with that? So we wouldn't have the priests that we have today. We would have very different priests. If we look at the Eastern Rite, the priests, they have both celibate priests and married priests, and the married priests don't do as much. They don't go out in the middle of the night to still go after their parish. They don't do daily mass because they can't, because of there's two words, profane and sacred, and it's 3 o'clock.
Time for the Divine Mercy. If you're out there and it's getting close to 3 o'clock,
pay attention.
Pray yourself some Divine Mercy.
Anyway, back to what I was saying.
The profane and the sacred.
The profane and the sacred. Now, we've heard of this word profane in the word profanity, which often means a cuss word or something like that. That's not what it means here. The original meaning of the word profane is earthly. So anything that is of the world.
Anything that's down to earth,
Yeah, like us.
We're profane.
Yeah, marriage is a profane thing, because it's of the world. So being married to somebody is profane. Being married to the church is sacred. The Mass is sacred because sacred things happen there. So,
in saying that, just a quick little caveat. Marriage is of the earth, but it's also sacred. It's in the sense that it's a sacrament. But it's a sacrament given to earthly beings.
Yes. Yeah. So we're earthly beings. We're profane. There's nothing wrong with that. But in order to engage in the sacred, we have, like, for example, the fast before Mass, the hour fast, to prepare yourselves to receive the Eucharist. As a priest, that fast would be more intense and slightly different. It won't be just don't have anything to eat. For example, in the Jewish tradition, John the Baptist's dad, what was his name? Zechariah. He was a priest, and he was married. Obviously, John the Baptist came about. But priests in those days, they were only a priest. They had 1 month of the year they were a priest, and in that month,
I think we know the high priest.
when they're the high priest, and in that month they didn't see their family. They went into the temple and they lived there, and they
served God,
did their sacred duties, and then they came out, and for the rest of the 11 months of the year they were a family man.
So they had to practice, as what's it called, perfect sexual continence.
Perfect sexual continence, yes. And when it comes to the Eastern Rite, when it comes to the Eastern Rite, what the priests actually do is they only do Mass twice a week, because they would have to have perfect sexual continence 24 hours before dealing with the Eucharist. Before,
and I can't think of any
Persona Christi
continents that are perfectly sexual, to be honest.
No, yeah.
So it's hard to do.
Yes.
But yeah, in short, so it was kind of a trade-off, saying, okay, either we can have the sacraments and the Mass more regularly, or your priests will be married.
So it's kind of like, what do you want in your priest? Do you want a priest that's dedicated solely to the work of the church, to providing the sacraments, to going out to the parishioners when they're in need, and in being married to the church? Or do you want a married man that's sometimes a priest, but he's also a married man?
And even just saying, you might say, well, having married priests might increase the number of priests. But if you look at the Anglicans or Greek Orthodox, their priests can be married, and yet they are still experiencing the same phenomenon with having a shortage of priests. So it's not just a cut and dried thing of like, well, why not?
Yes.
And as we've said, there are practical and theological reasons.
Yes.
And it's definitely something that look into a bit more. And what we're not saying here is that, well, yeah, of course it would be absolutely terrible. I mean, like we said before, the church, it's not dogma, so the church could decide. But in terms of justifying the reasons for why the church has chosen to be the way it is, I mean, there are so many different factors.
As Pope Francis said earlier in his papacy, he was asked on this question on married priesthood, and he said, well, it's worked for the last 1,000 years. Who am I to change it?
Yeah, and also there's that point that Paul was saying in the New Testament. He says when he's giving instructions to these new churches, there's that scripture where he says, a priest or a bishop should be the husband of one wife, and he was saying, and when we read that today, we think, oh, okay, it's not, they don't promote polygamy, but he was saying it was very normal for priests to be married in that time, in Greek and Roman societies. So, in fact, if you read into it, Paul is actually putting a nuance on that and saying, but making a point about how a priest should be married and to the church, to Christ. And so saying, a priest should be devoted to one spouse, and that is Christ.
Yes.
And then he goes on to say, that I imagine is the most perfect way.
Yes. There's lots of theological points to be made. There's lots of practical things to be made. But what we need to bear in mind is, in the changing of one thing, it brings change to a number of other things, and
exactly.
we see it in the differences between the Eastern Rite and the Western Rite of the Church, and we see it in the tradition of the Church all the way back to Judaism. Yeah,
and Jabba the Hutt, in his time, there was a lot going on there, and just differences between people. And there were some rogue Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn was a bit of a rogue, and some suspect that he might have had a bit of a woman on the side. But all in all, the Jedi thing, it's a bit of a weak reason not to be married.
We just like to dress up like Star Wars characters.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is the story of the church is much more plausible than anything that George Lucas could imagine. But in saying that, George Lucas, kudos.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all we've got time for today, so you keep it Catholic.
Stay Catholic.
We'll see you next time.
God bless.
God bless.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope you're enjoying it. We're certainly enjoying making it. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Auckland Catholic Tertiary Chaplains League.
Also, follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/The Chaplains.
Or you can find us on Instagram at Auckland Catholic Chaplaincy.
We also have a webpage, www.newmanhall.org.nz.
If you're going to be online, make sure that you like, you share, and comment in the box, maybe if you have some extra stuff to add to the conversation. Thanks.
God bless.